Hey, everybody. Welcome into Roosters on Olentangy River Road. I am Austin Ward. This is Lettermen Live, brought to you by our good friends at Roosters. It's normally a fun, casual conversation. It's going to be a little bit more serious today, just to let you know. I know that we hear a lot that everyone should stick to sports, whether that's a coach, whether that's a journalist, whether that's a former player like those two guys down there, Anthony Schlegel, Robert Landers, and, of course, the national champion, Urban Meyer. But I don't think that we can ignore what's happening right now. This is not a situation like a disease. What has happened with the riots around this country and the violence and oppression, we're not going to pretend like that's not going on. And it does impact everybody at Ohio State, and it affects the way we're going to do our job. But I don't know the best way to talk about it personally. You look at me, and my experience is not going to be the same. I'm not even going to pretend like I can, but I can listen, and we can give our platform here at Lettermen Row to the people that are impacted by that directly. I will say with 100% certainty and confidence that these young men, these African-American men that I've had the pleasure of covering at Ohio State and other stops in my career, they are some of the brightest, hardest working, most passionate people that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Robert Landers is one of them. And I will stand with them at any time. If they've got something on their mind or a project that they're passionate about or anything, and I will listen to anything they have to say. So, BB, I don't know where to start, but I know you're one of a number of people that have been willing to speak out about what's happening. What's on your heart, man?
I think the biggest thing is just all of it is crazy, man. You know what I mean? And it's sad to say that this is one of those things that has kind of been going on for a long time. And, as times are starting to evolve and as people are starting to realize the voice that they have, they're speaking up. And it's kind of sad that our country right now is having this issue. It's like everything is hitting back to back to back to back, you know what I mean, between the pandemic and then sports being, everything closing, sports being, canceled for the moment. And then, this situation, it's just kind of sad. And like right now, as a country, we're being tested, as athletes, we're being tested, as good people of the community and of this, beautiful country, we're being tested. And, it's sad to say some people are failing, you know what I mean? Some people are excelling, and, it's one of those things where a person like me, you kind of got to take life day by day and just do what you can and make a positive impact the best way that you can with everything that's going on. You know what I mean? It's a lot of mixed emotions for a lot of people, and it's a rough situation.
Urban, I know that you came in and sat down and you said that this one, just feels different. It seems to have really struck a chord with you. Why this one? Or you've spent your whole career talking about social issues, and I remember you were gracious enough to let me come in for that Patriot Week, and you wanted people to vote and educate your team. But this one seems to be even different for you.
Yeah, that was one of the most horrific things I ever witnessed. I could not. I actually sat down. I remember looking at it on my phone, and I sat down. I said, "I can't. This set our country back 20 years. I mean, that guy's got to go to jail. That was murder. That was awful." And it's a very complicated life right now. I didn't live a complicated life growing up. I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I have never one time in athletics, coaching, playing, ever looked at a person's skin or religion. Where you're from. Mm-hmm. There's never been one decision made on who plays because, or who we recruit, or who we talk to, who you hire. Nothing about that. That's why at times I'm not proud to say this, but I don't know if I always bought it. I'm like, come on, really? I really didn't know that it existed. Mm-hmm. And then Charlie Strong worked for me at Florida. We were great friends. I lived in his house at Notre Dame. That's how close we were, and our wives are best friends. And he told me you can't go out and recruit in a certain area after dark. And I really honestly didn't know I thought he might be being silly. I go, you're talking about 2005. What are you talking about, Coach? Right. And I could tell in his face he was being very serious. And then I've witnessed some things, never experienced it myself, but these players, BB knows this, how much we care for these guys. And I've always taken the approach, and not always, but recent history is, how do you make an impact? Okay, there's a problem, and this problem is real. I 15 years ago, did I really know that? No, I didn't know that. 5 years ago, did I know? I started. Now, that's real. And then how do you, instead of, how do you help? How do you, let's do something. Let's, in 2017, BB was part of that. We had Jalen Holmes, who's one of my greatest, I'm a big fan of his because he experienced racism. Remember the stories he used to tell? And I sat there with my mouth open going, you really went through that. How do we help? And it was all about, do the players kneel or not kneel? And that was not my decision. I wanted to listen. And J.T. Barrett's father was a retired Army person, and JT made his, and we had great leadership on the team. And Jalen says, Coach, we're not a team of symbolism, we're a team of action. Let's do something. And on Wednesday of the rivalry week, I look back now and go, wow, we really did that. Wednesday rivalry, we did invited a bunch of Columbus police officers, Ohio State police officers, firefighters, public servants, a bunch of children. Roy Hall of inner city children came out, and we opened the doors, man. We fed them. We had a great speakers. We're talking, and I thought, if our world would just do this, have dialogue, respect each other, listen. That's the number one thing, is listen to the pain. I want to hear it. And I, like you, stand with these guys and BB, and I've already talked to many of our former players. If there's something we can do, do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
BB, when you guys are having those conversations then in 2017, you're in that Rushman unit there with Jalen, and one of the most respected position coaches in America, and Larry Johnson. What were those conversations like? I mean, how did you want to kneel? Did you want to do something? How did that play out for you guys?
For me, it was. Let me start by saying this: the conversation was mutual. I felt like a lot of guys in our room, such as Jay Holmes, the Tracy Sprinkles, the Tyquan Lewis, is like the situation that was going on and the things that we just experienced growing up. It's one of those things like when you're growing up, you're taught, don't do this, try to avoid this. If you're in this situation, this is how you try to de-escalate it the best way that you can, because at times, you being of a certain race, you're automatically racially profiled. You know what I mean? And in our room, we had a lot of guys that we all had different stories that were different, but at the same time pertain around the same topic of us having issues because of, the color of our skin. You know what I mean? And I felt like in our room, some guys wanted to kneel, but at the same time, too, we had a large level of respect, because the flag represents also those guys that fight for our country, for us to be free. And we have people that we know or that we love that have fought for our country. So it was kind of like a catch-22, you know what I mean? Like, do you kneel for what we got going on now, or, do you not for, the guys that put their lives on the line on a daily basis for us to be able to sit here how we sit now, eating roosters together, having a conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was kind of a catch-22. And when Coach, when we ended up talking to Coach Meyer and putting an event together to have all of, the local PD and law enforcement in Columbus area, and then Roy Hall bringing those kids out, and you watching the interactions, and you're watching those kids run around having fun, not having to worry. You know what I mean? It was a beautiful thing. So I felt like that was our way of, like Coach Meyer said, doing something. You know what I mean? Taking action in a different way.
Schlegs, you kind of brought this up, I think maybe on Friday. You reached out, said we need to have a conversation about this. And for me, again, just from my limited life experience in that realm, I was a little bit hesitant on that part, because I've always been, told to stick to the sports and that people aren't coming to Lettermen Row for that. But, I would say even in 48, 72 hours, my perspective on that had to change. This is not something that you can pretend isn't happening. And that obviously also directly impacts the fact that the riots are happening 3 miles from here. But you said that this is a thing, the players are about to come back. The Woody's about to be open. They're going to go through summer conditioning. All those guys are going to be back together. That's an interesting dynamic. How do players and coaches handle situations like this when there are going to be different viewpoints?
Right. I wanted to bring it up because, a lot of people don't know, but where I grew up in Texas, the population was 70% African American, right? And the thing, Gene Smith has said this before numerous times, we're the sum of our life experiences, right? So I was very fortunate. Coach Meyer's fortunate. like we have people that raise us up and we coach, right? My dad coached. I mean, everybody was over at our house, man, all the time. And then you go through college, and I talked about last week about my maturation as a football player and how I needed to expand my mind as my identity in football. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Just like Coach Meyer was kind of talking about, I need to expand my vision and my interpretation of race as a football player as well, and as a man, right? So growing up, like, I really didn't see color. Why? They're my teammates. They're my friends. They're my training partner. Like, we're in there, early 90s, mid 90s, we're going to Tupac and DMX, and like, we're just training. These are my boys, right? Like, that's what we do. Playing pickup basketball where you got to call them up or they hitting you on the beeper, right? But then you go and you're around the situation and the stories that don't necessarily impact you, but they impact you because that's your boy, right? And then you get into college and you get married and your wife has different experience, and you start to come along and you grow in your understanding of what it is. And it's our differences that we should recognize, but also make us unique and beautiful. And coming together, it makes me better, just like it makes BB better, just like it makes Coach Meyer better. Because if we didn't understand each other's differences or experiences, we're never going to grow, right? So I think it was just so important to talk about this dynamic, because also why you come to Lettermen Row is to support these guys in Buckeye Nation when they're on the field. And you should be coming here to also support them during this, right? Because when you cheer them on, you're cheering them on in all aspects of our life, just like we love reading about BB and all the different things that he does off the field, right? Mm-hmm. It juices us up. But the beauty of sports is that we are all confined into one room, one building under an Urban Meyer for the sole purpose of us maximizing our genetic potential and winning a championship together, scarlet and gray, right? Like, that is the beauty of the locker room and everything that goes into that, and how we mature through it and then walk out of the doors as grown men, right? Like, that is the beautiful thing of sports and the beauty of team athletics, man. And I tell you what, like, I reached out to a lot of my guys that I played with. How are you feeling during this time? What do we need to do, right? How can I lift you up in prayer, right? How can I take action?
What do we need to do, BB?
It's a lot of different avenues you can take, man. I'll say this: I don't have the template. I more so just have my opinion. But my personal opinion is, you doing it. We having this conversation. Lettermen Row has a platform that has a lot of followers of all ethnicities that come from all backgrounds, and this is what it is: sitting down, having this conversation, and allowing the people's voices to be heard. You know what I mean? Coming to the realization of what is going on in our society right now, and just supporting the people, not only who are firsthand having to deal with it. And, my prayers go out to any parent or any family that has lost somebody, or anybody who is mentally and physically struggling right now. But the biggest thing is having this conversation, putting it on, on the front of the platform, and letting people speak out and express how they feel, and support the people who are on the front lines out physically and walking and expressing how they feel downtown.
Urban, at the risk of making that sports conversation, and Schlegel was talking about being in that locker room, what would be the coach's role? What would be Ryan Day's role? Or you also are now working with every single sport on campus and the captains. What is a coach's role in this? I'm
glad you asked, because I think for the listeners that this is real. I thought about this for so many years, and I use the term hope and opportunity. Your parent, as a parent, what's your ultimate responsibility? To provide your child hope and opportunity. And how you do that's up to that parent. As a coach, what's your ultimate job? My job was to provide BB Landers with hope and opportunity, not NFL, not national championships, but someday he can raise his child. He can put gas in the gas tank. He can have a career. He can have a life, because that's what the world is. And so we took that very seriously. When I first went to Utah, we dealt with Polynesian culture. I've never dealt with Polynesian culture. And one of the biggest issues was 1 out of 3 Polynesians were quitting school and going to fake hope and opportunity, pseudo hope. You know what that's called? Polynesian gangs on the west side of Salt Lake. And I couldn't get my hands on why was that happening. What was happening, these kids from Tonga and Samoa, island players that really had a hard time communicating. They couldn't communicate with faculty. No one helped them, and they couldn't pass classes. And where do you go? When your football dreams fail, you go to pseudo hope. And I don't want to get into too much, but you know what happens when pseudo hope disappears? It's in despair. That's when really bad stuff happens. So we took these kids, and Hiram DeFries, who was on my staff at Utah, who happens to be Polynesian, I didn't realize we started Real Life Wednesdays back then, but we did. Every Wednesday night we role played. We taught them how to communicate because how about this? For an island player, it's a sign of disrespect to look at your elders, to look at the king, to look at the people in charge. So I would have team meetings. You can imagine that didn't go very well. They weren't looking at me. And I was like, I cussed at them, and I was like, what do you? And then finally one of the players said, that's just and I was like, oh man, I didn't know that. No one told me. So you respect the culture. I got to know them. I got to learn about them. I actually flew to Samoa myself for that reason, to meet the families and learn about this culture. And so we started teaching them how to communicate with Falcon. Guess what happened? 1 out of 3 weren't leaving anymore. 1 out of 3 had a plan. They had hope and opportunity. When I first got to Ohio State, 1 out of 3 players were disappearing. Remember that, Schlegel?
Yeah.
Their careers weren't going well, and they weren't doing 2.0 in sociology or something. You're not hireable. So what did we do? We started Real Life Wednesdays, and we pushed these guys so hard to job shadow, to internships, to pick your career, to push Tommy to the point where we're driving them nuts. But that was our job, provide a plan B for every one of these players. Mm-hmm. So you ask, what can you do? You can provide hope and opportunity. How can you do that? I don't know. That's your world. How can a parent do it? There's great ways to do it. How does a police officer do it? Provide people hope and do never stand in the way of that. Never stand in the way of that. Because here, last thing, any group of people, whether it's people in Appalachia, whether it's my hometown in northeastern Ohio, whether it's African American, whether it's Polynesian, whether it's white, whatever it is, Asian, you take away hope and opportunity from a group of people. You know what happens? It's combustible. Bad things happen. So the most important thing our government can do, on top of some other stuff, but provide hope and opportunity to your fellow man. That's the answer. Now, how do you do that? That's very complicated.
We're going to let Coach Meyer get out of here, and BB's got to go do some more training so we can get that NFL deal this summer. I'll give you the last word before we cut you loose, BB. Anything else on your mind?
Not really, man. I'll say this. I appreciate you guys for doing this. It takes a lot to use your platform to allow somebody such as myself and Coach Meyer and Schlegel to come out and speak about a topic that is toxic right now, in our world. And you probably knew coming into this, you're going to get positive feedback and you can get some backlash, but you did it anyway. So I want to say for me personally, I appreciate you for having this conversation, for doing this event. This food look good, but I can't eat it because of the damn diet. But I appreciate you. You know what I mean?
I think
it took a lot to do that. So
I appreciate that, but we are doing this for you guys and all of your teammates and everybody that's we've had the pleasure of covering. Like I said, if this is the least we can do, then we were absolutely going to do that. But it's not about us. It is about you all, and we want to give our support any way we can. That's been the national champion, Urban Meyer, guy with a bunch of gold pants, Robert Landers. And of course, Schleg's hanging out with me for Lettermen Live at Roosters. We'll be right back with more show, but we're going to let these guys go. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Roosters is one of the unique companies that we deal with. They're involved in everything we do, from our personal foundation to also the Cancer Research Fund. And that's from the Buckeye Cruise from Cancer to all the events leading up to the Buckeye Cruise.
They donate back to different organizations that are near and dear to their heart. And we're so fortunate to have been with Roosters now for a long, long time.
All the folks at Roosters are just genuinely kind folks, and they want to make a difference.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
All right, welcome back to Roosters for our weekly conversation, Lettermen Live, talking about Ohio State football and a lot more than that this week. We got a little bit of a shift change. We've got the quarterback Jay-Z in the building now. Doug Worthington back for the first time in a few months.
Yes.
Got
Thanks
him
for
working for Lettermen Live, and Schlegel is still here. We couldn't get rid of him because he's still not done.
He lives at Roosters.
Dude, hey, why don't you pass those
he
down?
makes all these.
Why don't you pass those down to me?
You know who
That's all I need. That's all I
who
need.
was digging into that is Urban Meyer was going into this.
You did. I had to order another one.
Did you tell
Schlegel
him?
was mean mugging him. I saw him over there.
Just so you know, this is kind of good. It's awesome today that I I validated my choices here because guess who also is eating an Italian sub and mac and cheese bites?
Well,
guy happens to be Urban F. Meyer.
There you go.
I was wondering if you gave him the recommendation, or if you show up that's the designated
No, he just
meal.
walked in. He was like, "Ooh, I like that." I'm like, "Okay."
There you go. Let's order double.
All right, I feel especially
Order
bad
some more.
though,
I can eat too. I can put some down.
with Doug's weight training going on and judging me about all the stuff I eat and Schlegel's. You guys, I mean, I'm really up against it today with this crew. I mean,
Doug is
This side of the
enormous.
table is up against it.
Yeah, no doubt.
This is all quarantine push-ups
This
right
side.
I haven't stepped in the gym in months, and I don't plan on for another couple months. I'm gonna let all that kind of
You're just a big
weed
human
yourself
being.
out. I just little push-ups and sit-ups. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
all right, Schlegel, you did tell me that you had one more thing that you wanted to bring up after that first segment. So I'm going to get the mac and cheese bites out of you and get back to serious mode.
Well, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I was actually thinking a lot about what Coach Meyer just said, and he was talking about, like, what is our action? And, as a believer, the number one thing, too, is that you have to have some self-introspection. I've said a ton about this during COVID, right? But really, it's a heart disposition and a heart transplant about how we love people. You know what I'm saying? And that goes back to, again, my wife and I dialogue, conversation, talking, like, what are the prejudices that I have in my own life? What is the sin that I have in my own life? Like, unless you can go in and say, hey, here's why I'm wrong, how are you going to ever get better? Right? So if you don't go look at yourself, like, number one action is, like, you need to go look at yourself. Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Right? And then also what is my role to play in this? Well, there's a lot of people that are out there that are marching, that are talking about it on social media. Is it to berate them, not go on and be negative, or is it to pray for, uplift, right? Be positive, be a leader in the 20 square feet and the influence that you have. Like, there are so many different things that we all can do that adds value to this, to have a change. But the change 100% starts with you. And are you willing to do so? Right? Like, that is the number one thing, even in my own life, right? It's always when I go back, have a hard self-conversation about the real Anthony Schlegel, that's when you see where the crap is and where you need to get better.
There you go.
Right? And I think everybody needs to take a hard look in the mirror and say, where do I stand on this issue? How do I look and love people? And then that's the first step in moving forward.
I had a hard time, on the show, but even, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, people are starting to post more messages, and you see the riots and the violence going. You feel like this urgency that you need to say something, but for me, I had to stop because I just don't think I have an informed opinion on it. I don't have the same experience, so I've tried to take my step back to just listen.
Yeah.
So, like, what do I need to hear? You know what I mean? Like, what do you want to say about it?
It's a different time when it comes down to everything that we're having to deal with at one particular moment. So to have to sit down when it comes down to COVID, putting us down, and to have some things happen and repeatedly happen, and just think about so many other lives that were lost in the same type of movement, you have to realize that change it needs to be directed, and it needs to be on the forefront on a lot of people's minds. Like Schlegel said, a lot of it comes down to self-evaluation, trying to figure out what you can do wholeheartedly for yourself, making yourself the best in your household. But if you don't look like me, if you're not a person of color, what can you do outside of the box? What type of influence can you have to your peers that might not understand, people that you get to talk to on a day in and day out basis? Because, like Schlegel said earlier, we're brotherhoods in a locker room, and we do a lot of things together. And sometimes those not knowing and that guy's from this town where there's, a population of 0 of African Americans, and this guy was immersed in them. Everybody gets their different feel of the culture, and when you're put a team together, that comes and matches automatically for the most part. But when it comes down to society, a lot of times people are in their little boxes and they don't realize what's going on in the outside world. So what you can do is what you've been doing, is keeping the dialogue going, giving people like us a platform to be able to talk about it, and just vote, whether it's for somebody that we feel is right, or vote and have your opinion expressed. That's what I tell people. If you really feel really adamant about a situation, go out and do everything that you can in your power and actually make a change. Vote for, not just the presidency, but, the people who are, causing the governments and making the plans and the different arrangements for the community. Like, there's a lot of things that you go vote for. The primary, just go vote and just make your vote count and bring somebody along with you that might not have done it before, and just try to actually make a real difference. The differences that they're doing downtown and the crazy thing, it's crazy, but at the end of the day, hey, that type of a sound is being heard right now. So people are kind of listening a little bit more fine-tuned than they ever did before. And it sucks to be able to or have to see that. But, some eyes have been moved and changed, and some opinions and expressions have been uplifted a little bit more. And you get to look at history and how history lies on certain days. And it's just kind of crazy where we're at. And it's a beautiful thing to kind of realize that you have a voice or you have something that you can change. So I just say, everybody who's out there, express how you feel about it in your own way. There's no wrong way these days, but go out and do the biggest things and just vote and just take care of yourself. And like Schlegel said, do a self audit on the things that you can change to help out.
It's certainly not surprising. That's not the word, because of covering all you guys, and I can't continue to speak so highly of the recruits that come into Ohio State, the guys that are in that program, just tremendous people. But then you see, Seth Towns just transfers in, the Columbus basketball player, Columbus native, and then he gets detained. And you've got these guys that want to do something that are currently on the team that are, fed up and taking part. Like I said, that shouldn't be a surprise considering how passionate these Buckeyes are. But
right.
I mean, that still takes a little bit of a risk when you're a high-profile guy like that to go out into that and put yourself in that situation.
And that's the risk that, those guys almost have to take. To see somebody with a platform like him, who's a very highly educated man, who's done some great things in different realms, to be able to want to protest and want to get out front, and then have the voice and the attitude to go ahead and strike something, it kind of moves other people in different ways. Now, is there a correct way to do it? No. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to expressing yourself and being able to believe and stand upon something, that really right there for those guys, especially that young man, is going to hold true for the rest of his life. And hopefully the change gets sparked, and at least somebody seeing that guy and knowing who his character is, and he can what, I did it for a reason, and it changed this, that, and the third. So I'm happy for the outcome.
Jay-Z, you've been in these locker rooms, spent your whole life around it. I mean, it's all you and I can do is really listen and learn, right? I mean,
for sure.
What's that like for a guy maybe, in a different, getting to know different people and different experiences when you're coming up as a player?
I think these guys, and anybody who's been in a locker room, been a part of a football team, you got 100 and some guys in one room, it's a melting pot of America. And you just guys from everywhere. And you almost get sheltered from it because you and your brothers are busting your tail with one thought in mind. Hey, we want to win a national championship. We want to win. You just don't even think about the outside world. It's like you're in a little cocoon almost. And you get to meet these guys, and you just all have the same common goal, and it's football. And it's doing whatever, supporting your guys however you can, and doing whatever you can for football. And then you have something like this happen. I would imagine being back in a locker room now, lots of conversations would probably be going down. I was a quarterback. A lot of my receivers and skilled guys were, African American. I would probably sit there and, hey, let's talk about this. Let's just see, is there something I can do? Would you guys like me to do this, or how to attack something like that? Because you just don't think about it. But when something like this magnitude is going on, we have no other choice but to say, help me, help you. And kind of like, I want to do something, I want to say something, but I always, I would be nervous to say the wrong thing. Right. I don't want to come across a certain way. I it's just because I'm not in that position. I haven't been. I don't know what it's like. So I would just try and get with the guys and just see what we can do. Seth Towns going down and doing what he did. People are talking about that now, and that's what you can do when you have that sort of celebrity is, people notice, oh, well, there was a basketball player down there.
Right.
There's a lot of people that nobody knows the names of doing this stuff, but, that will stay with Seth, and he'll be able to talk about that, and people will ask him about it, and he will be able to move that forward. So, a lot of football players may, if they have that feel where they want to get out there and do that, they can use that platform to, get conversation going, to get things, kind of moving in a different direction. Or, like Schlegel said, or, both of you guys said, loving people, just being a good person, doing the right thing, looking at yourself in the mirror. What can I do today to help any of my buddies that might be going through something mentally or whatever. And that's how I would attack it. And it's just a weird thing. We go from one weird thing to another, man. It's
2020.
Crazy.
Justin just brought up a great point. Like he felt afraid or didn't want to necessarily say the wrong thing, right? And the problem is, like, people are going to say the wrong thing because they don't know, right? And so in our household, it's always talked about the grace upon grace upon grace, right? And so we also have to teach. And if you're a parent, you better not lose this time to go educate your children. Like, I was very blessed of what my dad did coaching, and I was educated to a certain degree. And then, then I learned as I got older about understanding the differences, which allowed me to be more empathetic and to grieve when they grieved and to mourn when they mourn and to celebrate when they celebrate, right? Everybody, I'm just talking about everybody. Yeah. But, like, you cannot lose this opportunity to go and educate your children as to what is actually going on. Like, we talk about COVID, like, hey, here's what's going down, right? Okay, well, guess what? There's racial tension in our country. Here's what's going down. Here's why I'm getting an alert on my phone like, hey, don't go downtown Columbus, right? But we gotta talk about it. Well, you want to live in this bubble, right, and protect them? What are you protecting them from, right? You're protecting them from, not learning from this experience that's going on in 2020 because they're going to school with kids of all different backgrounds, right? So you want to be able to educate them, and you're like, well, what's the age? Guess what, man? I got 13, 12, and 8 all getting educated, right? But that's how it works, and it starts with you as the parent to do that.
Well said.
I've always wondered too. Like, it seems obvious that you guys, when you're in school and in a locker room with these guys, that you wouldn't only talk about football. Like, you're going to have real life conversations. But having not been in the locker room in the Woody, like, how prevalent it would be and how heated maybe the arguments become. Like, it's hard to take us into that locker room to see what those conversations are like for you guys when you're in your formative years and you've got a bunch of different people that probably don't know exactly what your experiences are.
Yeah, I think that's tough because I think unless something like this is going on in the world, most of the time you're just cutting up on each other, I mean, this or that or the other in the locker room. It's a fun-loving atmosphere, no matter who it is, Doug could be next locker to mine. I could be cutting on him. It's like, so when something like this does happen, I didn't go through anything like that when we were there that I can remember, anything huge like this. But, for the most part, locker rooms are just fun-loving, because they're your brothers. Right. It's like you have 100 siblings and, you can beat up on each other. And you can do whatever you want. Right. You can say anything you want to them, and that's just your brother. And, it doesn't matter. But, these are bigger things. Team meetings or this or that when they're able to get back on. Now, if they would have been on campus this whole time and they're here, allowed to be in one room together, maybe that stuff would happen. I think that's probably where they would probably end up going towards. I think our leadership back on our teams would have said, hey, let's get everybody together and let's get, let's let our brothers talk and, inform us, educate us. Because a lot of guys, half the guys in that room are sitting there saying, I don't deal with this on a daily basis. Right. And so, you've got to become educated. Like Schlegel said, just educate and know as much as you can about things and go from there.
Yeah, we again, like Zwick said, we didn't have anything of this magnitude to happen in our locker room, but I do remember a time like one of our coaches, kind of got after one of the players kind of unjustly, and we had a guy who actually been affected by this riot, and Deontay Johnson, who owns Soul Classics, and I remember him as the captain called the team meeting. Well, he didn't call the meeting, but the meeting was going to happen. And, express his thoughts when it came down to that particular situation. So for that to happen, the way that it happened, it was monumental just to see a guy who was a peer of mine be able to stand up for one of the players and be there in a time where we all felt a little type of way about it. And with that being said, I got a decent little story. I actually, when I was playing and really tooth and nailing it, trying to get back to the NFL, I started to talk to BB about that grind. I was blessed to get a call from the St. Louis Rams, and it was about 2 weeks after Ferguson happened. So I remember, going into that place, remembering all the news that are still kind of popping on and things of that nature, and working out and being around Fisher and just that whole atmosphere. And I was actually, working out with 3 other guys, and I made it, luckily. And that locker room was affected by it. Now, it was one of those things where, you ripped in Tavon Austin, some other guys was asking me about players I knew for different teams and everybody trying to get to know you. And the crazy thing, I actually got into a fight the first day just because somebody was trying to, punk me on a practice squad.
Can't let that happen.
Take
the biggest guy out on the first day. How do you punch somebody?
How do you pick this guy?
I know.
I'll go a little bit into that story. It was a Barksdale was a guy who was a guitar guy, and he's a guy that actually was an active guy talking about depression in the NFL as well. And he was just doing his job, and I was doing my job maybe a little bit more than he wanted me to. And then he tried to push me out the club, and the next play I kind of just slammed him, and we used to going after. But I soon got close to that guy, and we got tighter. But to say this, when it comes down to a Ferguson and things happening, and right now, the team bonds together. And I remember there was around the Christmas time, we did so many outreaches. Guys like Chris Long, William Hayes, Robert Quinn, Aaron Donald. Those guys and they were a lot richer. They got so many toys and did so many things for the families in Ferguson. So teams get behind and like Coach Day, that thing that he expressed, and everybody I think retweeted it about if you're not in front of it, if you're not have a fight then you're losing basically. So. Guys like him, they get it. They understand that, you got to take care of these players. Even if you don't understand what they're going through, you got to at least put your hand out, open your ear, open your heart to this opportunity, and you're going to grow closer. As a community, sports like this, it brings people together. And when a team can fight and be behind a movement like this, I think it's going to be tremendous.
It seems like Deontay is still leading. He's still captain
still
of
leading
Columbus right now.
Still leading that way, yeah.
That situation's obviously sad. I think Beanie's going to talk to him later this week for his podcast. But
okay, that's awesome.
This guy will that was such a horrible thing to happen. It's have you had a chance to talk to him?
He took it with grace, though.
Okay.
He was more like, hey, man, I know you're mad. And he put I can't say verbatim what he put on the sign, but basically this is what we did to these kids. And we told them they were this, that, and the third. We didn't shelter them. We didn't give them the hugs. And now this, that, and the third is happening. We got to understand that they're angry. So it's one of those things where he took ownership of it. Like, hey, yeah, insurance going to pay for the glass. You took some shoes. I hope you get something out of it. But for the most part, I listen and I hear you and I feel you. And that's the real message of what we're all saying on this panel is just, we need to get closer as a society, as a human race in a time where they're trying to separate us. They're trying to, build a rhetoric, build this case and say that we're all different and we need to be different. We're all children. This is man of faith. Man of faith's up here. I'm a guy after God's own heart. I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus is no color, but we're together here on all of this. So when it comes down to what's going on, I just want people to just read a little bit more, voice a little bit more, and do your part as far as voting and really getting the facts about what's going on in this world. So.
Informed voting and
right.
Education. I think a lot of that has a lot to do with it.
Well said.
Yeah, I don't think that I could in good conscience go on to talk about Ohio State going back to voluntary workouts or Trey Sermon being healthy and going through stuff down in Texas as he gets ready to come to campus. That stuff can wait for another episode of Lettermen Live. I appreciate everybody for their thoughts on this. Like I said, I'm just going to try to listen here. I don't have the experience to speak on it, but hopefully we all know a little bit more now than we did half an hour ago. Anthony Schlegel, Robert Landers, Doug Worthington, Justin Zwick, Coach Urban Meyer. Hope I got them all right there. That's all the guests for Lettermen Live this week at Roosters. I know it's not been the one that maybe we envisioned, but I think it was an important one for us to have. We'll be back talking about Ohio State football right here next Monday with our friends at Roosters. For all these guys, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Lettermen Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.